old age. And it's kind of hard to define old age because, in fact, in the past, they used to say old age was 60 and beyond, or sometimes 65 and beyond. But the problem, if you describe it as especially 60 and beyond, today people are living longer and longer. They're living into their late 70s and on into their 80s and even 90s, and many are having their centennial birthday. And so if you just say 60 and beyond, that's just too huge of a category. So we either need to divide it into old and oldest old, or we need to push the age back a little bit. But what we do know is people are living longer and longer these days, and they're healthy for longer and long periods of time. Men on the average today live about 75 years. Women on the average live about 7 years longer than that. And again, if we were looking at health and some of the changes as people age, we could look at things such as, well, let's look at the senses again. We talked about that with midlife a little bit. With the senses, if we're talking about vision, as I said before, you've probably got corrective lenses to help you read for things up close and that sort of thing, but they are developing some other issues, such as the lenses in their eye may become so clouded that literally the light can't get through to get back to their retina. This is called cataracts, and they may have to have that lens removed so that the light can, and they put in an artificial one so the light can get through back to the back of the eye. Some people, even if they do have that their cataracts removed, may still have difficulty seeing because of another leading cause of blindness among older people, and that is called wet age-related macular degeneration. And this happens more back at the level of the retina instead of up at the level of the lens. And this causes people to have holes in their visual field. And so for some people, that can be really problematic too as they age. When it comes to hearing, many people do hear quite well even into old age, but if they are going to have problems with hearing, it's usually those higher pitches, like hearing violins playing or birds singing or a soft child's voice. And so for older individuals that are having more and more difficulty hearing, it's important to get them a hearing aid. And hearing aids today are just tiny little things that slip in your ear. Because what happens if an older person keeps having to say, "What'd you say? What'd you say?" They're embarrassed about that. And so they get to the point where they don't ask. And it used to be they were in the center of things in family activities, and now they're pulling more and more out to the periphery, and they're less able to be engaged, and it's important for them mentally, for their mental stimulation, to keep them as best able to hear as they can, and that way they can get not only the enjoyment of life, but they can also have the mental stimulation that they need from hearing things that are going on in their everyday surroundings. Okay, taste also does change as people age. They lose about 1/3 of their taste buds. And so with older people, we don't want to put too much salt and that sort of thing on their food, but you want to make sure it's very flavorful with all kinds of other seasonings, because otherwise their food can become quite boring, and they may also, in fact, become kind of anorexic. Every other period of life we had to worry about our weight, trying to keep our weight down. But in old age, actually becoming too thin is a problem. It might indicate illness. And so we want to make sure that they're eating enough and they're eating the right kinds of things and encourage that as they age. The sense of smell also does decline somewhat in older age because the olfactory bulb itself shrinks. Strength, noticeable changes now. People are less strong than they were when they were younger, and most people are okay. They understand that's just part of aging. Reaction time, I said, in midlife wasn't so much change at all, but in old age it is noticeable. And so some people say, what's causing the change in reaction time? Is it general slowing? I mean, mentally it takes me longer to think about what I have to do, and then I finally get my arms and legs to do it? Or is it peripheral slowing? And that is, my brain is saying, get a move on, but my limbs just won't move quickly enough. In fact, it's both. As people age, yes, their limbs don't move quickly enough, but it also takes them longer to react to things. Like if they're driving and someone pulls out on them unexpectedly, it just takes them longer to react to things. So it is general slowing and it's peripheral slowing. It's both. Okay, and so there are other physical changes too, such as the body becomes drier, and so they may need more fluids and moisturizing creams and that sort of thing. Also, the brain shrinks and pulls away from the skull. As I said before, though, people perform very well on cognitive tests throughout old age, and so maybe just because your brain size is somewhat smaller doesn't mean it doesn't function well. But there is some noticeable changes in the brain as they age. Some people do experience dementia, and that is serious problems with thinking as they age, and oftentimes it's due to disease. The number one cause of dementia is Alzheimer's. At 60 years old, only about 2% of people have any kind of dementia, problems with thought and memory and other kinds of things. But as you get on up into much older age, like 85 and beyond, now about 50% of people do have some dementia. Women are more likely to get dementia than men, probably because they live longer than men. They're more likely to get to those ages to begin with. Other causes of dementia would be things like stroke and hardening of the arteries and other things where you don't get enough oxygen-rich blood flowing to the brain. Okay, so in addition to those sort of things in old age, other physical concerns we might have would be heart disease. And heart disease, I mentioned before, is the number one killer and of people when they get old. And we can certainly lessen our chance of having heart disease by keeping a good diet and continuing to exercise even in old age. Even if it might be more limited, if we can continue to exercise, that would be good. Okay, and then let me talk just very briefly in the time remaining about relationships. Most people in old age still have, if their spouse is still there, do still have a positive relationship with their spouse. Women tend to become a little bit more domineering, a little bit more outgoing. Men tend to become a little bit more nurturing and looking towards the home and family, so their personality dynamics change a little bit. But most people continue to be happy with their relationships as they age. Although I will say, because men perish younger than women, men are more likely to live with their spouse throughout their life, whereas women in old age are more likely to be living alone or with non-relatives. Now, many do still have their spouse, but they're more likely to be alone or with non-relatives. Okay. Your book also does talk a little bit about retirement, and a lot of times people look so forward to retirement. And today people are retiring at younger and younger ages than they did in the past. But when people retire, oftentimes they're expecting to just travel and fish and golf and do all those fun things. And for a while after they retire, in fact, they do those things. And it's so much fun. They don't have to set the alarm clock in the morning, and they're all excited, and they do those things. But it isn't too long before reality sets in, and they're like, wait a minute, I'm only 65. Am I going to do nothing but this for the rest of my life? And they decide, that's not enough for me. I need my life to have more meaning. And so for some of those people, they will terminate retirement and go back to work. But for other people, they just need to redefine retirement and find new ways to bring meaning to their life, whether it's through volunteer work or through mentoring younger people or through some sort of special hobby that they didn't have time to do when they were younger. But elderly people need to find ways to bring meaning into their life, not just relaxation. Okay, that's all for now for that chapter.